The alarm on my console screamed before I even finished my coffee, and I knew, in that first second, that this was not a drill. My name is Ethan Blake, and I was the communications officer on a small research outpost called Halden Station, floating quietly near the edge of a system that most of the galaxy had forgotten existed. We were 12 people on that station, 12 scientists and support staff, studying a strange energy field that pulsed from a dead star nearby. We were not soldiers. We were not built for war, and yet, in the space of one heartbeat, war found us anyway. "Multiple contacts, closing fast," said Grace Whitmore, our sensor operator, her voice tight and her hands already flying across her controls. "They are not answering our hailing signal. Formation looks military. I count 6 ships. 6 ships. 6 ships. Against a station with no shields worth mentioning, and no weapons beyond a single defense turret meant for stray asteroids." I felt my stomach drop, but there was no time to feel afraid. Fear is a luxury you get to enjoy later, after you survive. "Get me a visual," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The screen flickered and there they were. Sleek, dark hulls, curved like blades, moving in perfect formation. I recognized the markings instantly, and my blood went cold. The Vrail Compact, a coalition of older species who had, for centuries, treated the rest of the galaxy like an unfinished project. They believed in strength, they believed in order, and most of all, they believed that species like mine, humans, were a mistake that had somehow survived far longer than we should have. "They are hailing us now," Grace said. I opened the channel. A voice came through, cold and amused, speaking our language with a strange, clipped accent. "Halden Station. This system falls under compact jurisdiction as of this cycle. You have 1 hour to evacuate. Anything left behind will be considered abandoned property." I clenched my jaw. "This station belongs to Earth. We have research rights registered with the Central Assembly." There was a pause, and then laughter. Actual laughter, echoing through the channel like it was the funniest thing the voice had heard in years. "Earth," the voice repeated, savoring the word like a joke. "The apes still think paperwork matters out here. Evacuate, or don't. It makes no difference to us." The channel cut. I turned to my crew. 12 faces, some pale, some furious, none of them ready to give up. Dr. Amelia Grant, our lead scientist, stood in the doorway, her arms crossed. "We are not leaving our research behind because someone with better ships thinks we are a joke," she said. "We don't have a choice," said Oliver Marsh, our engineer, sweat already forming on his forehead. "1 turret against 6 warships. That is not a fight. That is a sentence." "Then we don't fight," I said, my mind racing. "We stall. We call for help." Grace shook her head. "The nearest fleet presence is 11 hours away. We don't have 11 hours. We have 1. I looked around the room, at the people who trusted me to find an answer, and for 1 terrible second, I had nothing. Then I remembered something my grandfather used to say, back when I was a boy watching him fix old machines that everyone else had thrown away. He used to say that humans were never the strongest animal in any room, not for most of our history, and that we had learned, a long time ago, that speed of thought could outlast speed of muscle every single time. "Grace, patch me into the deep relay," I said. "Not the normal channel. The old emergency band, the one built into every human vessel since the war years. That band hasn't been used in a decade," she said, already typing. "Nobody monitors it anymore." "Someone still does," I said. "Trust me." She patched it through, and I spoke into the silence, not knowing if anyone was listening at all. "This is Halden Station, civilian research outpost, under threat from 6 compact warships. We have 12 souls aboard. We need help. If anyone can hear this, please respond." Static answered me. Long, empty static, stretching for 10 seconds, then 20, then 30. I felt the weight of it pressing on my chest. Then, a voice broke through, calm and steady, cutting through the noise like a blade through fog. "Halden Station, this is Captain Laura Finch of the deep patrol vessel Meridian. We hear you. We are 3 hours out at full burn. Hold position and stay calm. Help is coming." 3 hours. It felt like a lifetime away, but it was also the first real hope I had felt since the alarm went off. "Copy that, Meridian," I said. "We will hold as long as we can." The channel closed, and I turned to my crew. "We have 3 hours to survive 1 hour deadline. We need to buy time." Dr. Grant stepped forward. "The energy field we have been studying. It reacts strangely to ship engines. It caused feedback in our own sensors last week. If we can direct that field toward their formation, it might scramble their targeting systems long enough to slow them down." "Might," Oliver said. "That is a big word to bet 12 lives on." "It is the only word we have," she answered. I nodded. "Do it. Grace, keep monitoring their approach. Oliver, get that turret ready. Even if it is a bluff, sometimes a bluff is all you need to make someone hesitate." The next 20 minutes felt like they lasted a year. Dr. Grant and her team worked at their console, rerouting power from every system that was not essential, feeding it into an array pointed at the approaching ships. Grace called out distances every few minutes, her voice growing tighter each time. 40,000 kilometers. They are still in formation. No change in speed. 30,000 kilometers. 20,000. They are slowing down slightly. I think the field is starting to interfere with something. A small cheer went through the room, quickly hushed by the seriousness of what was still ahead of us. Then the channel opened again and the same cold voice returned, but this time the amusement was gone. "Halden Station, your little trick with the energy field has been noted. Cease immediately, or we will consider this an act of aggression." I looked at Dr. Grant. She looked back at me, and there was no fear in her eyes anymore, only determination. "Tell them," she said, "that apes learn quickly." I opened the channel. "This station will continue to protect its research and its people, using every tool available to us. If you consider survival an act of aggression, then I suppose that is exactly what this is." The voice did not laugh this time. "You have made your choice," it said, and the channel cut again. "They are increasing speed," Grace said, panic creeping back into her voice. 10,000 kilometers. They will be in weapons range in 4 minutes. 4 minutes, not 3 hours. 4 minutes. I felt the room tighten around me, every breath suddenly loud, every heartbeat suddenly visible in the shaking hands of the people around me. I thought about my sister back on Earth, about the small garden she kept behind her house, about how strange it was that in a moment like this, the mind reaches for the smallest, gentlest memories instead of the largest fears. "Turret is active," Oliver said, his voice cracking slightly. "It won't do much, but it is something." "Energy field is at maximum output," Dr. Grant said. "It is causing real interference now. 2 of their ships have dropped out of formation." 2 out of 6, Grace said. "The other 4 are still coming. 3 minutes to weapons range." I stood at the center of the room, watching the screen, watching the small dots representing warships grow slightly larger with every passing second, and I understood, in that moment, something my grandfather had never fully explained to me. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is doing the necessary thing while the fear is still sitting right there in your chest, refusing to leave. 2 minutes, Grace said. Static crackled through the speakers again, and for one terrible second, I thought it was the compact voice returning to finish their threat. Instead, it was Captain Finch, her voice suddenly closer, sharper, carrying an edge of urgency that had not been there before. "Halden Station. This is Meridian. We have increased burn. We are 90 minutes out, not 3 hours. Hold on. We are coming faster than planned." 90 minutes was still far too long for 2 minutes of weapons range, and everyone in that room knew it, but somehow, hearing her voice again gave the whole crew a strange, steady calm, the kind of calm that comes from knowing you are not facing the end completely alone. 1 minute, Grace said. "They have adjusted course around the interference. They are coming straight at us now." I looked at my crew. 12 people who had come to this quiet corner of space to study energy patterns in a dead star, who had never expected to face down a war fleet, who were now standing at their stations instead of running, instead of hiding, instead of giving up. "Whatever happens," I said, "we do not stop working until the very last second. We are not apes to them. We are not a joke. We are the people who refuse to disappear quietly. Let's make sure they remember that." Dr. Grant nodded, her hands steady on her console. Oliver gripped the turret controls, his jaw set. Grace kept her eyes locked on the screen, calling out distances in a voice that no longer shook. 30 seconds to weapons range. The compact ships grew larger on the screen, 4 sleek shapes cutting through the dark, and I braced myself for the first strike, for the sound of impact against our thin hull, for whatever came next. Then something changed on the screen. A new set of lights appeared at the very edge of our sensors, moving fast, faster than anything I had seen before. "New contacts," Grace said, her voice suddenly rising with disbelief. "Multiple new contacts, approaching at extreme speed. It's the Meridian, and she's not alone." The screen filled with new shapes, sharp and fast, human designs cutting through the black like arrows loosed from a bow, and among them, unmistakably, was the Meridian, leading the charge with 3 other vessels flanking her. The compact ships broke formation immediately, their sensors clearly registering the sudden arrival, and their cold, confident approach turned, in an instant, into confusion. The channel crackled open again, and this time, it was Captain Finch speaking, not to us, but to the compact fleet, her voice carrying the same calm steel it had held from the very first message. Compact vessels, you are trespassing on a registered civilian research station under Earth jurisdiction. Withdraw immediately, or we will consider this an act of aggression against Earth citizens, and we will respond accordingly. There was a long pause, and I could almost feel the confusion radiating from the enemy fleet through the silence itself. Then the cold voice returned, but the amusement was gone completely now, replaced by something far more careful. Meridian-class vessel, your numbers do not match ours. 4 ships against 4 remaining compact vessels is not a victory you can claim. You are right, Captain Finch answered. It isn't about numbers. It is about resolve. Ask your sensors how many of your ships have already dropped out of formation because of something as simple as a research team refusing to give up. Ask yourself what happens when the rest of our fleet arrives, because trust me, they are already on their way. Another long pause followed, and I watched the screen with my heart pounding, watching the compact ships hesitate, their formation drifting slightly, uncertain. This is not over, the voice finally said. Consider this a temporary withdrawal, nothing more. The 4 remaining compact ships turned, slowly at first, then with increasing speed, retreating back toward the edge of the system, and disappearing from our sensors entirely. The room erupted into cheers, relief flooding through every face, tears in some eyes, laughter in others. Dr. Grant sat back in her chair, exhaling for what felt like the first time in an hour. Oliver leaned against the turret console, his hands finally steady. Grace put her head down for a moment, just breathing. I opened the channel one more time. Meridian. This is Halden Station. Thank you. We owe you everything. Captain Finch's voice came back, warm now, no longer carrying the sharp edge of urgency. You don't owe us anything, Ethan. You held the line long enough for us to reach you. That is not something small. That is everything. How did you get here so fast? I asked. You said 3 hours, then 90 minutes, and you arrived in less than that. There was a small laugh on the other end. Because the moment we heard your distress call, 3 other patrol ships in the sector heard it too, and they didn't wait for orders. They just came. That is the thing about us, Ethan. We don't always wait to be told what the right thing is. Sometimes we just do it. I looked around the room at my crew, at the people who had refused to give up even when the odds were impossible. And I thought about that cold voice calling us apes, mocking a species that had clawed its way up from nothing, and I understood something clearly for the first time. They had spent so long looking down on us that they had never bothered to look closely at what we had actually become. They saw the fur that no longer covered most of our bodies, and forgot to notice the fire we had learned to carry inside us instead. They saw a species that argued and struggled and fought among itself and assumed that meant weakness, never realizing that all that struggle had taught us how to face impossible odds without breaking. Dr. Grant walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. You did well, Ethan. We all did, I said. 12 scientists standing against 6 warships. Nobody would have blamed us for running. Running was never really an option, she said quietly, not for us. Over the following days, word of what happened at Halden Station spread quickly across the sector, then across the wider assembly of allied worlds, and finally, slowly, even into the quieter corners of compact space itself. A small research team, unarmed and outnumbered, had refused to surrender their post, had used their own scientific work as a shield, and had held their ground long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Reinforcements that had come not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to. I received a message a few weeks later from an old professor of mine on Earth, a quiet man who had spent his whole life studying old alliances and old wars between species far older than ours. He wrote that the story of Halden Station was being shared now among other species, not with mockery this time, but with something closer to caution, closer to respect. He wrote that for centuries, other species had underestimated humans because we looked unfinished to them, because our history was full of conflict and struggle in ways that seemed messy compared to their long, orderly peace. But he said that what we had at Halden Station was something they had never expected. 12 ordinary people, none of them soldiers, choosing to stand their ground rather than run, calling for help not out of weakness, but out of the simple belief that someone would answer, and being right. I think about that a lot now, sitting in my quarters on Halden Station, looking out at the dead star we had once studied so quietly. The one that almost cost us everything and ended up saving us instead. We were never the strongest species in the galaxy. We probably never will be. But somewhere along our long, difficult path, we learned something that many older, stronger species had forgotten completely. We learned that courage is not about being unbeatable. It is about refusing to stop trying even when everything says you should. The compact ships never returned to our system again. Word reached us months later that talks had begun between Earth's assembly representatives and compact leadership, treating us, for the first time, as equals rather than curiosities to be managed. I do not know exactly what changed their minds. Maybe it was fear of a species that refused to be predictable. Maybe it was simple respect, earned the hard way, out here in the quiet dark where nobody was watching except us. What I do know is this. When that cold voice called us apes, meaning it as an insult, I did not feel shame. I felt something closer to pride. Because apes, whatever else they were, learned to stand upright when nothing forced them to. They learned to build fire when the cold could have simply killed them instead. They learned to reach for the stars long before anyone believed they deserved to. And when the galaxy finally looked closely enough to see what we had actually built out of all that struggle, they stopped laughing. They started paying attention instead.